I'm Justin Davis, and this is Joe Camp's RC. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we have something pretty cool to take a look at. We're going to talk about the Rotor Riot Riot Control flight controller. It's an Omnibus F4. We're going to unbox it for you, and we're going to take a look at their layout. They're pretty experienced in the field and in the FPV community, so you're going to be interested to see what they chose for a flight controller layout. It's going to be pretty interesting. And there's also a lot of bells and whistles packed into this flight controller. And also, if you want to get entered into the July drawing, please do that by clicking on my Patreon down below. We're trying to ramp that up this month and really get that going to help support the channel and keep the lights on here. We're going to give away the Futon 2 next month in July, Patreon only giveaways. So please do click the link below and support me on the channel and support my efforts in making videos for you guys. But right now, let's go ahead and talk about the star of the show today from Rotor Riot. It does say Hype Train Electronics on here, and there's some pretty interesting things packed into this flight controller. I think you guys are going to like it because it does support a 2 to 6S battery, and it now supports Crossfire modules. And that's super great for those of us who use Team Black Sheep Crossfire modules and micro receivers. But it looks like a pretty cool flight controller, so let's go ahead and put it on the bench and take a look at it and unbox it and show you what's included with it. Okay, so here is the flight controller box. It says Hype Train on the top. We've got some Riot gear guys on the front. That's pretty cool. And it does say F4 on the front, MPU 6000 gyro on here, and it is a floating gyro, I noticed. And it does have Betaflight OSD, so that is something that most of us want for sure. You have that F405 processor. We have an IMU soft-mounted MPU 6000 gyro. We have a target of Omnibus F4, so if you're trying to reflash the firmware on here, it's going to be a standard Omnibus F4 firmware inside Betaflight. It does have multi-stage dampening. That's pretty cool. They have dampening inside here, so some little rubber grommets are going to go in between your flight controller and your ESC stack if you're using a 4-in-1 ESC. And most importantly, it supports 2 to 6S, which I love. That's super nice. I could throw this on my America if I wanted to. It also has integrated Betaflight OSD, which is great because you can go inside Betaflight. You can change up all the parameters on screen or move things around, which is super nice. If you're new to FPV, you're going to love Betaflight OSD. It's way better than the old days of Minim OSD. A little less control, but right there inside Betaflight, which is super nice. It also has a built-in current sensor, which most of us want. It has 8 megabytes of onboard black box flash storage, which is super great for recording all of your flight controller's parameters during operation. It has a breakout port for 4-in-1 ESCs, so yeah, thumbs up for that, guys. That's kind of nice. So it supports both types of ESCs, either individual or 4-in-1 ESCs. And it also supports S-Bus receivers, DSMX receivers, and CRSF support, which is Crossfire micro receivers, or any type of Crossfire supported receivers from Team Black Sheep. Now let's just go ahead and remove the sleeve here, and it's pretty cool packaging. I like that. And nice plastic box, and there it is. There's the flight controller. Pretty cool. They do include an XT60 battery connector here, and it's already tinned up on the ends. That's kind of nice. Thank you, Chad, for doing that. And we have a beeper in here, which is super great. Still got the sticker on that. I usually wait to pull that off until I'm totally set up because it'll beep really, really loud. So we're going to set this to the side. This looks pretty good. I see that Rotor Riot logo on there, of course. We have a few different harnesses here for your 4-in-1 ESCs. We'll check those out in a minute. And here is all of your hardware and your rubber dampeners for your grommets to stabilize that F4 just a little more. Sometimes the F4 can be a little more sensitive than the F3. Some of the F3s are easier to tune. Of course, the F4 is running a higher gyro rate. And we'll check that out also inside Betaflight to see what the current gyro rate is inside there. Here's one of those grommets. Just a little black spongy grommet there. I'll dump out all the hardware. So we'll have that nice and dampened. And let's go ahead and take a little closer look at the flight controller itself. But before we zoom into the flight controller, this is the pamphlet that came along with it inside, and it has a large map of the flight controller on the back, which I love. Everything is labeled here, and it does have an email on here, so if you want to email them and annoy the crap out of them, it's products@rotorriot.com, and ask them all of your questions. It also supports 6 UARTs on here. That's super great. So if you want to do TBS Smart Audio, ESC telemetry, run cam split on there, you can do that. TBS Smart Audio runs on UART 6, 2x ESC telemetry on UART3, run cam split on UART4. That's super awesome. And Crossfire is going to be on UART1. It supports that. That's pretty cool. And it says B and DSM pads connected there. Crossfire TX to RX1, Crossfire RX to TX1 there. So Frsky S bus is going to be on UART1 as well, and Spectrum and DSMX is also going to be on UART1. But of course for DSMX you're going to have to power it by 3.3 volt by running it off to a different selection on the pad, and I'll show you that in just a second. So let's go ahead and take a look at their board here and see what type of layout they chose. I do see right up at the top here in the front they put Riot Control F4 right there. That's the name of the board, and we're running version 1.0. This is their initial layout for the first version of this board, and it looks pretty good. We have some pretty standard looking stuff here and some other fancier looking stuff. Now right away I see that they have their battery terminal right here in the back, and there's your ground, and your positive wire is going to go on there. This is also where you're going to solder on any type of capacitor for cleaning up your video. I also see the floating gyro there, and I'll just tilt the board a little bit so you can see it's actually raised up above the board. Look at that. And there's a little wire harness going in there, a tiny micro wire harness, and it doesn't look like it sticks out too much. You can see it there. I've seen other types of floating processors where they have a huge harness coming off of it, so that looks pretty small there, and it should be removable. You should be able to get that off somehow. There's 4 screws on the very bottom there. It looks like little Phillips head screws hold that. So if you needed to replace this at any point, it looks like it might be replaceable, which is really good thing for you guys. Now, like I said before, it does support 4-in-1 ESC, so they have a harness on the bottom as well right here. You're going to use that harness that came in the pack to go down to your 4-in-1 ESC, and there's several types of ends and several different types of harnesses there to support all the 4-in-1 ESCs. If you don't want to run 4-in-1 ESCs, this is also cool because it does have a standard solo ESC setup here, S1 right there. So you're going to have your negative and positive terminal pads right here. Your signal wire is going to go there, and up here positive and negative there. For S2, that's motor 2, motor 3, and motor 4 up here, and those look pretty neatly packed away and tucked away in each corner of the flight controller. Over here you have your USB port for hooking up to Betaflight. We have the boot button right here, which is going to be for flashing your firmware. If you want to reflash the firmware on this board, like I said before, it's the Omnibus F4 firmware inside Betaflight. Now, I said before upon first looking at this flight controller that I thought they had pretty much a standard setup for the round tab there and the square tab. The round tab normally being the positive section and the square one being for your ground wires, but this is actually opposite. I'm looking at their schematic, and so this is going to be positive and this is going to be negative here. So very interesting that this is kind of flipped around. Normally the way I see it is positive for round and square for generally square for your ground wires. But anyway, we're going to check out this front rail right here, and this is normally where you put your VTX and camera. You can see that little arrow pointing to the front of the quad right there, and the first in the series of this rail is going to be 5 volt over here. This is going to be for any of your 5 volt accessories. We have ground there, and the next one down to the right is LED. We have RX6 right here. The next one down is going to be ground, and a TX6 here. You're going to do your camera here, and just behind that is where your VTX signal wire is going to go. And below that, this is very interesting, we have 2 9-volt spots right here for powering your camera or VTX. And Rotor Riot tells us that we're going to get noise-free video from using this type of connection to our camera and VTX. So a very nice option that they've added in here. And I'll let you know how this flight controller board tests out and how the video looks when I get one soldered up to a quad. But below that we have 2 ground tabs, and like I said before, those are circular on this particular flight controller. So all your round tabs are going to be where your ground wires go. Let's take a look at this back rail right here. We have a few different things going on right here. All the way to the left right here, you have your negative port right there for your buzzer and your positive port. So your buzzer is just going to go on these 2. The next one over is going to be RX3. TX3 on the very top one. RX1 is going to be here, and this is your inverted UART right there. If you decide that you want to run any type of inverted S-Bus receivers, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. TX1 is up top right here, and RX1, this is the normal mode if you're running it in normal mode, and 5 volt just above that. That's also a square tab like I showed you before. Down below that we have another 5 volt option tab, a 5 volt option tab there, and we have 2 more grounds at the very end. And over here next to the USB port, we have a few other things here for PPM, RSSI right here, and we have ground and 3.3 volt for powering your Spectrum receivers. And over here we have a few more sort of micro style tabs. We have DSM right there, B, which I'm not really sure what that one means. If anybody knows what that one is, let me know in the comments below. And we have an S-Bus tab right there for a signal wire. And so let's just take a little bit closer look at this larger sort of floating gyro that we have here in the center of the board. And I did notice that mine's kind of sitting on an angle, so I'm going to have to make sure I calibrate this before I do my first takeoff. So if you get one of these, you want to take a look at that gyro. That might be kind of the way it is for most of the flight controllers that get sent out by Rotor Riot, but I thought I'd just kind of mention that I noticed that it was sitting on an angle. It probably should be taken off, and that should be pressed down flat. It looks like there might be some sticky tape just below that, which it might have popped off of, but not a big deal because I can just use a little tiny Phillips head screwdriver and remove that and take a look at that. So I did want to show you guys their UART guide, and this is pretty important for adding your different types of components on your different UARTs for receivers, VTX, and other things like ESC telemetry or the RunCam split. Right up at the very top, we have protocol for Spectrum and DSMX on UART 1, and it says with B and DSM pads connected. So that B little tab that I showed you guys earlier, that's where that's going to go for DSM and Spectrum receivers, and the pad is going to be labeled RX1, which is the normal protocol right there. And for the next one over, you're going to do an inverted protocol, which is for Frsky S-Bus receivers, and that's going to be on UART 1 with B and the S-Bus pads connected there, and it's labeled RX1 inverted. So if you're trying to run an Frsky S-Bus receiver, you are going to put it on that RX1 pad that I showed you earlier. Now the next one down is the Frsky S-Port tab, and that's going to be on the UART 3, which is going to be labeled TX3 on the flight controller where I showed you earlier. And then just look back at the schematic right here. You can see TX1 here and TX3 just above it right there. So that's where your smart port is going to be on this particular flight controller. Now what's really interesting for me is that they have Crossfire. A lot of people love Crossfire, and that's going to be on UART 1 there, and with B and DSM pads connected. So they have that one labeled Crossfire TX to RX1 norm, Crossfire RX to TX1. Now your TBS Smart Audio is going to be on UART 6 inside Betaflight, and that's going to be labeled TX6, and that's going to be this tab right here, which is on the top rail up there. That's going to be TX6 right there for your TBS Smart Audio, and your ESC telemetry wire is going to go to the UART 3 right there, and it does go to RX3. So your RX3 tab is right here on this bottom rail. And for the RunCam split, you're going to run that on UART 3 inside Betaflight. Just make sure that tab is selected, and you're going to run the RunCam TX to RX3 right there, as they say. Also RunCam RX to TX3. So pretty easy setup, but they do note that all-in-one function may be only assigned to each UART. That means that with UART 1 used for receiver and UART 6 used for VTX control, UART 3 can only be used for ESC telemetry or RunCam split or Frsky S-Port, not more than one. So take that note of that. So like I was saying, there is some pretty fancy stuff built into this flight controller. It has pretty much a full spectrum of different types of receivers supported on here. I like that a lot. It also supports inverted jumper pads on UART 1, so you can use it for both inverted S-Bus protocols as well as non-inverted protocols, which is great, such as DSMX or Crossfire, which a lot of us want. And it also has those fancy 9-volt power tabs for powering your camera and VTX so that you don't get any noise in your video, and that's yet to be determined. So we'll see about that coming up on the channel, and I'll try to get this soldered up to a nice new frame that we can fly and check this one out for you guys. But anyway, thanks for watching this overview, guys. This has been the Hype Train Electronics Rotor Riot Omnibus F4 flight controller, and it should be available in their store soon. I'll put a link down below. But that's pretty much it for this flight controller and the version 1.0 of their Betaflight F4 flight controller. Very interesting and fully functional flight controller. Pretty solid release from them, especially for a version 1.0. You know, you probably wouldn't expect anything less from Rotor Riot and Hype Train Electronics if you've seen some of their other stuff. But you can click on their link below and check out more specs. I'll try to put a direct link right to their flight controller information for this board, and you can check out the price and any other interesting info about this flight controller you want to. So thanks again for subscribing, guys. I'll bring you more new stuff and the latest and greatest right here on the channel. Please do subscribe. Click that subscribe button, guys. Thanks a lot. Thanks for hanging out with me and checking out Rotor Riot's newest flight controller. I'll see you on the next one.